Should. There we go. Welcome everyone to our first ever artist spotlight, which we're hoping to start doing monthly. We are thrilled to start it off with one of our favorites, Joan Applebaum. So Joan here is not only a phenomenal artist, but she is also a phenomenal teacher. And many of you may have had her or seen her work. So we're so thrilled to have you, Joan. And thank you for participating as our artist spotlight this month.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yay. Okay, so we have some questions for Joan and we're going to work our way through them, starting with who are you and what do you do?
Hi, I'm Joan Applebaum, and I am primarily a painter. As you can see, I'm in my studio, and I have a lot of my paintings around me at the moment. You will notice that a lot of them look kind of like the seashore, and that's because I'm preparing for a show coming up at the end of March at the Mispillion Art Gallery, where I'm featured artist, which means I basically have a special wall just for me. And it will be all about the beach, because when I'm not living in the North Country, I live in Lewis, Delaware. So I live at the point where the Atlantic Ocean and the Delaware Bay meet each other. So the ocean is a big deal down here. But part of my heart lives in the North Country, and you can see in the background, there's a typical North Country scene on the watercolor board there with the boat and the cabin and the pine trees.
That is it's so neat to see that because, you know, having seen your work from here, you don't see a lot of the beach scenes when you're up here. So it's
You're
fun
not going to see
that.
any beach scenes up
Yeah,
there.
there's not beach scenes up here. Oh, that's where did you say your exhibition is going to be?
It will be at the Mispillion Art League in Milford, Delaware.
Oh, neat. So anyone in Delaware, make sure you stop and check it out.
Yeah, right.
So, Joan, how did you choose your medium and why?
That's a good question. Sometimes it's a case of the medium maybe choosing you. And since I've been producing artwork for a long time, and living in places where I sometimes didn't have a real studio. I had, you know, a one-bedroom apartment, and I was creating art in my living room, and I had a cat. And so that sort of dictated that I was going to work with dry media. And so I started working in colored pencil and pencil, and I really did like that, but it's really a little too labor intensive after a while. I switched over to pastel by then. I had a studio, I was married, I had kids, and then kids and pets and pastels. Well, okay. That kind of makes a mess. And I really got tired of the dry, dusty pastel mess. And I switched to acrylic painting. And I had done acrylic painting before. I had just gotten away from it. So I got back into it, and I haven't left acrylics. I do love acrylic painting. It's fast, the colors are great, and you can use them in a lot of the same ways that you can use oil. And then in the case of watercolor, I didn't really choose watercolor. I had never worked in watercolor, didn't really want to. And a lot of my students, if they're listening to this Zoom, they've already heard the story. But I was working for the Y Art Studio in Syracuse. It was actually in Fayetteville. And we had a watercolor teacher who was really good, but she moved to Florida. So we kept having people asking, can somebody teach watercolor? And we did not have a single person to teach. And at that point, I was teaching other things, and I was also the studio coordinator. And I said to our studio director at one point, we keep getting asked this question, why don't we just have someone teach watercolor, like maybe me? We used to work about 6 months out on our schedule, and I said, put it on the schedule for, the next session, and I will just teach myself watercolor. And so I went into it, and the first painting that I did, I said, oh, I really like this.
Wow.
Well, so that's how I arrived at watercolor. It was out of a necessity we had a lot of people just asking for the class, and I gave myself time to learn techniques. And in the case with watercolor, if you ask any watercolor artist, they will say they're still learning, and you really are, because watercolor is the boss. It's in charge, not necessarily you. And that's what makes it fun.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Like I'm the type of artist who needs a lot of control. So I find watercolor to be so challenging because, like you said,
Mhm.
it's in charge. So you got to give
Right,
up a lot of your control. You can manipulate it, but it still might, dry faster than
right.
you anticipated. Or
Well, the piece that's on the easel back there with the boat in the cabin back there somewhere is so that's a lot different from a lot of my usual ones. I like to work with less control.
Mhm.
However, with my arm being in a sling, I cannot just do a big sloppy wet watercolor and tilt the board back and forth like I would like to do. I love to let the colors flow a lot more. So for me to get back into painting and being hampered by using only one arm, I had to go for a more controlled approach.
Oh.
So I'm kind of missing the big sloppy, mess that paint around and let it do its thing kind of feel. But so it's a different watercolor for me. It's a lot more controlled and a lot more detailed, a lot more
Mhm.
detailed.
I mean, it's at a little bit of a distance, but I still can see it. It looks pretty vibrant, which
Yeah.
I
Yep.
love. That's one of the things in your work that I always love too, that you always tend to have some type of vibrant color somewhere. Sometimes you have a lot of
Mhm.
purples, which I like too.
I love purple.
The
I know.
purples really come out. Yeah.
But note in this one, it's all about the greens and browns and
Mhm.
yellows, little dashes of blue. It's very much what I see on the lake when I'm at camp.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Let's see. Can you walk us through your creative process?
Well, the process is usually I do respond mainly to nature and landscape. Those are my usually my go-tos. And um, I, in order to paint a scene, it's got to grab me, and it's usually the lighting that will do it.
Mhm.
Composition, composition is going to depend on where you're standing, where you see it from. So, you can, it's the lighting that first of all will grab me. And typically, I have my phone with me and I might take some pictures. If I have a sketchbook with me, that's even better because I can do a sketch, but that doesn't happen that often. And especially if I'm out in my kayak, even the phone's not such a great idea on the kayak. But I mean, truthfully, this is not from my camp sketchbook, but I do have sketchbooks like this. This is from
Oh, wow, that's
if you
wonderful.
can picture me
Oh my God.
sitting in a kayak with this on my knees,
Oh my God.
and you're tethered off, on someone's dock because otherwise you'll float away
Yeah.
and you're still dealing with this up and down, up and down, up and
My
down.
gosh. I'd love to see. Somebody needs to just film you doing that.
It is pretty funny, especially when there's a snake or a spider involved on the
Oh
scene.
my gosh. I can
But
only
the
imagine.
process really for me is it's all about, it's about the lighting and about the colors, of course. But you can always pump up color as you need to in
Mhm.
a painting. Because, the idea is to
Yeah.
make a good painting, not to do a totally faithful representation of nature, but to do a good painting, something that you're happy with.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, like you're not going to illustrate every single leaf on the tree.
No, oh my God, no.
Yeah.
Who
Unless
has
you're
that kind
crazy.
of time?
Who would you say are your biggest influences?
Oh, my influences, I really do like the Impressionist painters, and I tend to go toward that palette more than a realistic palette. So yeah, definitely the Impressionist painters, and then also painters like Winslow Homer.
Oh,
Um, those Adirondack scenes that he painted were wonderful. Frederick Remington also. Everyone thinks of him as being a sculptor, but he had some marvelous paintings as well.
paintings. Yeah.
And then I just kind of feed off of the creativity of a lot of the artists that, I'm around, either when I'm down here in Delaware or in the summer and early fall when I'm up at camp. There's so much creativity. And I've been really fortunate in both places to connect with those people. And so, that just keeps you going.
Yeah, agreed. There's nothing better than getting a whole group of artists in a room,
Mhm.
seeing where they go and the
Right.
discussions that come out of it. Yeah, yes, agreed. So here's a big question. How can artists, or have you adapted to change or challenging situations? Sorry.
Well, we all adapted recently in 2020. COVID came through and we became more isolated, and artists tend to work alone. And I think one of the reasons why we enjoy getting together is because we do tend to work alone more than dancers or musicians. And so writers also tend to work alone. And so that aloneness became even more during COVID, and we started looking for ways to get together, and people are still doing it now, like right now, we're Zooming.
Mhm.
Um, and so we started adapting right then. And I did teach an alcohol inks class in online last year to a group of artists out in Northern California. So I just thought that was pretty darn cool to connect with people across the country and be able to do that. So that's one way of adapting. Obviously, I'm adapting because of the sling. So I had already mentioned that, I've kind of scaled back on how I do a watercolor. I haven't done any acrylics, and and there's a really dumb but really practical reason why. So when you're painting in watercolor, I'm going to just hold up my palette, which is probably pretty messy, but it is. A watercolor artists know we put a whole lot of pigment in those little cups there, and we just need water to activate it, and it lasts for quite a long time. But when you're working in acrylic paint, um, you have to keep opening tubes. Well, guess how hard that is to do when you only have one hand to do it.
Yeah.
So before I had surgery, I actually went and filled up all my watercolor things.
In
Just in
preparation.
anticipation for not being able to open acrylics. I wasn't going to have to call my husband, 15 times during the course of a painting and say, "Can you open a tube?"
Yeah.
So there's an adaptation right there that's just done for practical means. And when I'm at camp, I have a half a bedroom as a studio.
Mhm.
When I'm here, I have a studio, which is great. Studio and storage, even better. So we adapt in a lot of ways, but also one of the things that I found too is uh, urban sketching has really been a big deal in the last, I don't know, 5, 10 years. I mean, it's been around for a long time, and it is a worldwide phenomenon, and it's pretty cool. And so I started doing it, and I actually signed up for it in Syracuse. I signed up to join the group, and then we moved. So I never did sketch with them. So I joined the group in Delaware, and I have found that, just being out there with just a sketchbook and the little watercolor pens and ink where you're sketching, and if you made a mistake, no big deal, no erasers. And so, that forces you to work a little faster and to be more observant. And so, I
Was it,
really,
you had gone to Italy, right?
I
Was it
went to
Italy?
Italy.
And you
Yeah,
had a sketchbook with you then.
right. That's where this came
Oh,
from here.
yeah.
So
Mhm.
there are a lot of scenes of Italy, and I got so interested in doing it that when I went to camp last year, I started the camp sketchbook, and that has been a lot of fun. And that really does include a lot of those sketches from when I'm in the kayak.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I went to visit my kids during the Christmas vacation, and so they're scattered, across the country. And there's only three. I make it sound like there's 20, but there's three. Um, but we traveled, and I brought the sketchbook with me. So we have sketches from Oahu and from Bellingham, Washington, and from Rockville, Maryland, all in the sketchbook, to kind of commemorate that really cool Christmas holiday that we had.
Yeah.
So it's a fun way to work, and I'm going to be teaching one of the classes at the Art Center this summer.
Yay.
So,
Yes, actually, so that brings us towards the end of our interview. So let's talk about the classes that you will be or have taught at the
It's
art center.
Clayton, but you know what? Thing with Zoom
Perfect.
is like everything's backwards on there, right? But
No, it actually it's coming
oh,
through correct.
oh, perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, great.
I
So I was in
recognize that.
Clayton one day during the summer, and I sketched a few different scenes in Clayton, and so then they're in the camp book. And
Mhm.
then when I came back home, I decided I liked it so much that I did a larger version of it with a bunch of crazy supplies like kids' marking pens and
Oh,
so
fun.
on. So yeah, and so it's the whole idea of that less is more when you're working. Don't carry much with you. Just try to, keep it minimal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Neat. So you'll be teaching kind of like urban sketching? Is
It
that
is. It's going to be urban
yeah.
sketching. We're gonna start out at the farmers market.
Oh,
So it's set for
neat.
a Thursday. So we'll be at the farmers market, which is always great because it's colorful.
Yeah.
And if it's hot and sunny, we'll be in the shade. So that'll be nice. And then from there, we'll head down into Clayton. There'll be a break in between, and there'll also be like an intro at the beginning where I teach some really quick techniques for capturing people, for capturing architecture or trees or whatever. So we start with that. We walk to the farmer's market, and then there'll be a little bit of a like, let's have something to eat time, snack time. And then we'll head downtown unless it rains. So if it rains, I think the rain thing we'll probably end up either on the front porch
Mhm.
at the art center,
Mhm.
or maybe we'll have to talk to people over at the Antique Boat Museum and say, hey.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Hey, we're joining you temporarily.
Yeah,
Oh,
because
that'd be
that could be pretty cool too. So
that would be fun. Yeah.
yeah,
And that a lot of good opportunities for both nature and architecture there. So,
exactly. Clayton's great. I mean, the architecture is beautiful, and
mhm.
yeah, and the river and the boats, and I mean, come on, there's so much.
Yeah, I know. And endless possibilities, even just looking out my
Mhm.
here. So, well, neat. Thank you so much, Joan. Anybody watching it who would like to take Joan's class, I hope that's all of you. Contact Marcia in the office or visit our website, tiartcenter.org. Thank you so much, Joan, for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay, and I will see you when I get up to camp this summer. I'll see you on Zoom before then, but
Perfect. Sounds like
okay.
a plan.
Okay, all right,
Thank
take
you.
care.
Bye.